All right, this is the first. This is the first time I ever got shoes for a talk. It's gonna be a good one. Better be a good one. Well, hey, it's great to see you guys. That lunch was awesome, right? Yeah. Shout out to Jimmy. I mean, talk about famous. That's great. So, hey, let's get to know each other real quick. Tyler gave me just a few minutes to share. I want to share a couple stories with you. First about me, I'm a Maryland guy. So I grew up in Glen Burnie, and I went to Old Mill High School. Went to Towson University after that. I ended up getting into ministry, working at a church for about 12 years, and I never, ever would have said I was going to end up in ministry working at a church. So I went to Towson for business and marketing, thinking, hey, I just want to make money. I want to do well. I want to provide for a family. Honestly, I wanted the house with a 3-car garage, Porsche 911 Turbo, maybe a tennis court in the backyard. Like, that was sort of the dream. And I thought, hey, business marketing, that'll do it. So, but a turn of events happened when we ran into some friends who invited us from a gym, and I see a lot of you guys are like hitting it, putting me to shame. Feel really 43 right now, because I mean, dang. But from the gym that I used to go to, I got invited to a bar in downtown Baltimore, Howl at the Moon. And from that bar, the friends that had invited us said, hey, this was a fun night. There's also this little small group Bible study that happens on Wednesdays. You should come out. And it was a very weird, interesting invitation as a 22-year-old at a bar. You're getting invited to a Bible study. But we were kind of interested. My girlfriend at the time, who we're now married, we went and we were expecting either bookworms or like people drinking Kool-Aid waiting for the hail bop to fly by, if you get what I'm saying. But we went there, and it was surprisingly refreshing. These people were surprisingly down to earth. They were doing better in life than I was. But the game changer was, for really the first time ever, even though I was a kid that kind of grew up in church, I was seeing Jesus in the Bible in a whole new light, because it was really relevant to life. It wasn't like old school or archaic or anything like that. It wasn't like, oh, all the rules of the Bible now that I have to follow. It was more that I was coming to see that maybe Jesus is who he claimed to be. And that road just led me from one step to another. And all of a sudden, instead of taking a corporate job at Pfizer Pharmaceutical like the year before Viagra came out, I took an unpaid pastoral internship at a church. So, which really disappointed my father-in-law at the time. But that's a whole nother story that I do not have time to get into. But I'm no longer at the church that I worked at for so many years, although I am out in the streets doing this thing called Grace Bomb. I want to talk about grace today, but not necessarily Grace Bomb. And so, if you guys want to real quick know what Grace Bomb is, sorry, I got to leave the camera shot. If you think about a random act of kindness, they're great. We're human beings, and we should perpetuate kindness in the world. But when you take a Grace Bomb card, which has a very simple link to a website, it turns a random act of kindness into an intentional act of love motivated by Jesus. And so when you start implementing this as you're walking and loving and hanging with neighbors and surprising them in love, it's a big deal. And you might say, well, Pat, I mean, isn't kindness enough? Isn't that good enough? You know, we need that in the world. Why are you putting Jesus into it? Well, it comes back to that Bible study. It comes back to, if Jesus is who he claimed to be, that means, yes, I'm going to feel the love of these shoes every time I wear them. But when he says this was a grace bomb, and I'm like, what is that? What does that have to do with anything? He's also telling me that if you think that felt good, could you imagine an infinitely powerful creator who actually knows your name and is the one who designed you on this planet to walk with him? It's a crazy proposition. So what we do with Grace Bomb, we hook people, communities, groups, churches, organizations up all over the country with these cards, with these tools and the content as a gift. So Grace Bomb is a nonprofit ministry that I wouldn't consider myself a high-flying business person, but somehow, as the Lord leads, we're looking at 13 different languages, partnering with other countries, and the whole nine. So it's been a fun ride, and it's been, like Tyler said, just one step of faith at a time. There's no master plan. You just kind of like follow where God wants you to go, and all of a sudden, bam, you ended up at a really cool spot. And that's true for business as well. And what I wanted to do is share a story with you in my one adventure, even though I was still working at a church, into real estate investing. So just by way of hands, like if you're in that real estate investor game, just let me give a quick show of hands here. So some of you guys, and so if you're not in that game, you might be in another business game or the like. Well, here's the thing about me and my wife. So Kristen and I, we've been married for about 20 years now. You guys know the show Fixer Upper with Chip and JoJo? You know that show? Everybody loves it, very beloved. But the problem with that show is when my wife watches Fixer Upper, she looks at me like I'm Chip Gaines. Like, hey, yeah, let's take this wall down. Let's do shiplap here. Let's add a bathroom. And, let's not worry about all the foundational structural issues. Let's just go for it. And like what we don't see on that show is the probably hundreds of people flipping those houses for then Joanna to come in and stage. Well, all hyped up on Fixer Upper and the fact that my wife does have some skills in this area, we found a Fixer Upper. I have no idea how we got this house. It was a $150,000 house in Glen Burnie. To give you some context, it took 6 full dumpsters to clear out the hoard that was in the house before we could even get into it. Mind you, we took out like a loan with a reno loan attached, so we're not like investors coming in and doing a quick flip. We're like, here's a pastor and his wife, wide-eyed and scared like a deer coming into this situation. So for about 3 to 4 months, man, blood, sweat, tears, people coming and just helping out and figuring things out, and sometimes we had a permit and sometimes we didn't, and we're just trying to get this thing done. And if you're a county inspector, I am not in this game anymore. But we learned a lot, and it was challenging at times. It was scary at times. This house was basically a knockdown. We had so much money wrapped up in this thing that we did not even have. So it's like, well, we can do that room on this credit card and that room on that credit card. Again, maybe not the best financial stewardship. Probably have to come back to another meetup and get a good download on that. But I wanted you to get in it with me because then came the time to sell. And we listed pretty high for Glen Burnie. We listed like 450. This is back a few years ago. And we had all these showings, but no offers. It's like, wonder what's up with that. It's kind of waited, all these showings, still no offers. And I'm just kind of looking back at the bills and thinking, well, at some point we'll be able to wipe those out because, we're going to make something on this house. But it was beautiful, and Kristen had a great time doing it. We ended up not selling it because there was this family who needed a place to stay for 18 months. They were a family who, they were here, they were missionaries, they had these kids, they had a nice yard. So we let them live there for 18 months. We rented it to them, kind of grace bombed them with a lower rent. And 18 months comes around, and we are just so ready to get this thing off the books. So ready. Can't even imagine this thing need to come off the books. So we list again, and all of a sudden, bam, 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 offers, cash offers, first day offers. This is cool. This is moving in the right direction. I'm pumped about this. But the buyer's inspector flagged something in the basement. Came down to the basement, and he said, yeah, looking like that one wall, that's got a significant structural problem there, buddy. We're going to want to get the structural engineer inspector from the county in. It's like, oh, shit, crap, So I went down and I put on my best thinking hat and I looked at it and I looked at it from this angle and looked at it from that angle. I nicknamed her Old Beau because she did have a little bow there. I didn't think it was a safety issue because it'd probably been that way for 50 years. It was an older house. So, being a pastor, ministry, following Jesus, I looked at it and I said, I bet I can cover that up. So I did. I went to Home Depot, got framing lumber, got some insulation, and I reasoned to myself this way. I said, I'm going to hide half of it so that he doesn't see the worst of it by putting a wall in front of it. But if he really wanted to, he could come around and inspect. But maybe he's not even going to notice. So I did. Got all my tools, went and I built it. And it was a pretty wall. Oh my goodness. I was thinking they could put shelves here, maybe a little closet, some storage space. But then that night I walked away and something was eating away at me on the inside. Because you don't have to be a Bible scholar to know you shouldn't like cheat people and lie. And that's essentially what I was doing. I was cutting a corner, I was hiding something, I was lying, and I was setting my future neighbor up for some failure. So I was convicted. I was feeling this weight. I don't know if you've ever felt that sometimes where it's like, you know the right thing and maybe you didn't do it and it's just kind of heavy and it's just kind of hard and you're wrestling with it. And I wrestled and so it just didn't feel right. And so I started to pray the next day. And the next day I'm driving along, and here's the thing, guys. I do think Jesus is who he claimed to be. I think he literally died on a cross and literally rose 3 days later, and we have to stand back and say, what's up with that? But I'm also not very superstitious. Like when I pray, I don't expect God to write on the wall or anything. But 3 times he wrote on the wall. And this is important because I was clearly doing something wrong, dishonest, not right. It's not going to be good for my neighbor. I know God's not cool with it. But instead of dropping a lightning bolt, he gives grace. And I'm going to tell you what he did, but I believe that to be true for all of us. Because there's going to be times where we build walls, when we put stuff up, it's going to become an issue between us and a neighbor, or those same walls become issues between us and God. We're afraid of what's on the other side of the wall, perhaps. And I think the perception of a lot of people is well, I'm doing this bad thing, man, and if I start to move towards God on this, he's just going to drop the hammer. But I don't think that is how he rolls. It's not how he rolled with me. So I'm driving along, and it's one of these little baseball stories, and I had this prayer in my head. Jesus, is the wall a good thing or a bad thing? One of those. I'm trying to get him on my side, right? And I kid you not, you can't make this up. Nobody else was on the highway. It's probably 97. This obnoxious white Honda Civic with a muffler that shouldn't even be on there comes right along as soon as I prayed that prayer. No inconspicuous markings, nothing too gaudy on the car except a bumper sticker that read 666. I said, dang. Now, again, you don't need to be a Bible scholar to know that, generally speaking, the number 666 is kind of negative in the Bible. Towards the end, when it's referenced for Satan and all that stuff. And so I called the Satan Civic, and bam, it went flying by. And I took that as a very clear, yeah, it's not cool. And you know what I did? I just ignored it, and I turned the country music back on. Because I rationed with myself. I rationalized. I said, well, he can still see behind the wall. So I went home, went to bed that night. It's about 48 hours before the inspector's going to come. Then the next morning, I'm in Starbucks hanging out in Edgewater. And remember, the house is in Glen Burnie, and there's only a couple county inspectors who do this with the structural stuff. And I pray again. This time I'm praying in my little journal. Sometimes it helps me to pray in my journal. And I was like, Lord, do you really want me to take this wall down? Is that big of a deal? Because remember, I'm thinking, if an inspector comes in and shuts this deal down, I need to sell this house, man. And this is going to crash the deal. Who wants to buy a house with a really bad foundation, right? It's going to be a problem. That was my fear. And so I'm praying, and I kid you not, as clear as day, the next human being, of all the human beings on planet Earth, who can walk into a Starbucks at that exact moment, upon that exact prayer, was the inspector. No. Yes. Yes, that's what I thought. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Answered prayer, immediate, number 2. I wish I can't even make that story up. I probably kept writing I probably just stopped writing at that point. It's okay, Lord, I think I know the right thing. I think I know what I'm supposed to do. You gave me the Satan Civic. Now this guy, after work today, I'm going to go to the wall. I'm going to take down the wall. That's what I'm going to do. So with all the resolve and all the gusto, I get there. It's nighttime. The next day, he's going to be there. So it's this thing's got to come down, come what may, because I know you don't want this wall to be here. It's getting between you and me. It's going to be between me and my neighbor. And I look at that wall, and I pause, and I grab my demo day hammer that Kristen got in Waco, because remember, we're all fixer-upper, all jacked up on fixer-upper. And I look at it and I say, that is potential storage space for this new family. I chickened out. and I went home. And tell you, it's one of the worst night's sleep I ever had in my life. It's just eating at you like, can't do it. It's too scary. It's the right thing. The whole nine, man. The whole nine. Woke up. Inspector's coming in 2 hours. I pull in because I get there a little early, just in case, need to do other stuff at the house. I say one final prayer. I close my eyes. It's a gray, dreary day in Glen Burnie. It's like February or March, just terrible day. And somehow when you say Glen Burnie with it makes it seem worse. You know what I'm saying? I can do that because I am Glen Burnie. So it's like I have permission. But I close my eyes and I say, okay, God, this is it. I'm thinking I'm going to leave the wall up. Just, what do you think? As if I needed another thing. Open my eyes, and in the backdrop of a completely black and white day, there is this huge, giant red cardinal bird sitting in these back bushes. It's the first thing my eyes saw. And again, that's not a big deal, anybody. It's like, I don't even know if there's cardinals in the Bible. But when Kristen and I see a cardinal, we always reference that as the Jesus bird. I don't know why. It's like, that's our Jesus bird. So man, I tell you, at that very moment, that was the last straw. And what hit me was, as I'm wrestling internally with doing the right thing, trying to get away with something that's not right, what hit me was, this is God not throwing lightning bolts at me because I'm doing the wrong thing. This is him giving me one grace bomb after another. So I said, all right, I've got to trust that you have my best interest in mind. I'm going to go do the right thing. And I knew at that moment I just had to bust a move, because if I gave myself any time to think about it, I was going to chicken out again. So I go down there, and it probably took me 2 hours to build that stupid wall, and it took me 2 minutes to rip that wall down. But let me tell you what happened as soon as I swung that hammer and the wall came down. I got to explain it to you like this. There was a peace that passed all understanding that filled my heart and my mind and my body and my anxiety and my stress. And at that moment, I actually did not even care how the deal goes down. Because at that moment, when I did the thing that I knew was the right thing before God, peace flooded my life. And so many of these walls can be put up in our lives, can't they? They pop up overnight. All of a sudden, you just go to Home Depot and bam, there's a wall. And we tend to think, because we're human beings, we're going to put walls up. We're going to skew towards lying. We're going to skew towards cheating. We're going to skew towards stealing, all of these things, jealousy, and maybe doing other things. In my life, I've seen God's graceful hand, not lightning bolts. And what that means is, if we can identify a wall, we can trust him to deal with what's on the other side of it. Now, I'm not here this morning to preach a sermon to you guys. I really just want to share some of my life. But I can tell you, when you turn the pages of the scripture time and time again, this is the kind of God that you find. You find a God who leads with kindness. You find a God who leads with grace. You might think that you have some walls that are just too crazy of what's on the other side. You got to take to your deathbed, and somehow it's eating away at you, and you can never envision taking those things down. But let me tell you, God loves to see what happens when you take those walls down. I will share one story in closing with you from the Bible. You might recognize a guy named King David from back in the Old Testament. Now, King David got famous in our day because of the David and Goliath thing. It's that guy. Well, he was a shepherd. He was a poet. He was described in the Bible as a man after the Lord's own heart. And if you don't know King David's story, he took the nation of Israel to the height of her military power. He secured the borders. This was the heyday of the nation of Israel back in the day. King David was the man. And after him, Solomon would build the temple, and parts of that temple are believed to even stand in existence today. But David built an epic wall. I mean, if you guys think that you have stuff that you're trying to cover up and hide, you got nothing on King David. King David's story at this point in his life reads like Jerry Springer and the Knights of the Round Table. It is a jacked up little story. And if you don't know how the story goes, he should have been out with the troops on the field, fighting the battle, doing the thing. And later on, if you guys have a Bible or get one, you can look this up in 2 Samuel. It's a part of the Bible where it's recounting this history. Well, David wasn't out with the troops. David was out hanging out at the penthouse at his roof, just chilling out, doing his thing. And then who does he spot across the way but a very beautiful young lady taking a bath, taking a shower, which he had the full purview to see. And with all the power in the world, David says, bring her here. Well, David knew that that woman, Bathsheba, was married to one of his commanders named Uriah. Didn't really matter. It was going down. It got all X-rated. She gets with child. What does David do? I'm going to cover this thing up. He tries 3 times to cover this thing up. He pulls the husband off the battlefield once he finds out that she's pregnant. And he says, Uriah, take some time off, man. Go hang out with the wife, like soon. Be intimate, have fun, do all that stuff. In hopes that when she is, publicly pregnant and having that kid, be like, well, Uriah was home, it's all good. They didn't have paternity testing back then. Nobody's going to figure it out. Paternity testing back then was probably like, hey, take that kid. Put it... yeah, that's dad. That was paternity testing back 4,000 years ago, right? That didn't work. Uriah was too honorable. I mean, check this out. Here's this honorable dude. He says, no, I can't do that right now. It sounds like a nice night at home, but my boys are out on the field. I'm not going to leave my boys on the field. I mean, now David's looking like pathetic at this point. He's like, okay, well, maybe he's going to try again. Attempt to cover up number 2 was, I want you to go home with your wife, but let's get a little tipsy first. Maybe we can blame it on the alcohol. And now go. Let's grease the skids. Go with Bathsheba. They have some fun. They get their drink on. But then he says, no, I'm not going home because I'm going to stay close to my boys. This is where I need to be. The 3rd attempt was the most treacherous and atrocious cover-up. This is where he just had to snuff him out. So he sends Uriah to the front of the battle and kills him. Essentially, Uriah is murdered as part of a cover-up. Now, David can marry Bathsheba, make it look like a mercy marriage, and it'd be totally fine that they have this kid together. But this is a dude who fought battles for the Lord, who wrote songs for the Lord, who said, I love God, but yet stuff goes down. Now, clearly God was not cool with this, but does God send an army to wipe David out for this atrocious wall that he's put up, for the people that he's hurt? I mean, homeboy probably broke almost all 10 commandments in that period of time. Setting a record. Lying, cheating, stealing, adultery, murder, the whole thing. The whole thing. What does God do? He doesn't send a lightning bolt. He sends a grace bomb. He sends grace. Grace came in the form of this prophet named Nathan, and Nathan said, bro, he tells David this story. And what happens at the end of that story is David realizes what he had done. He's like, this breaks my heart. I mean, the murder's bad, and the stealing's bad, and the adultery is bad, and all of that's bad, but even more than that, he knew that he was just not right with his Creator. And he says, God, against you and you only have I sinned. But wouldn't you know that David is able to be restored to joy? Wouldn't you know that David is able to have peace? Because David took down that wall in his life. 3 very simple things that he did. He owned the fact that all that crap he did was not good. Not good. Yep, shouldn't be doing that. That's on me. But then he turns to God to take the guilt. He turns to God to take the shame. He turns to God to do something about all of the problems, all of the pain that he's made. And we can all still do that today. Because any of the walls that come up, he's just like, let me take those walls from you. Like, I will forgive those walls. I will give you grace. I will give you mercy because really I want to be with you on the other side of the wall. And when you're with him on the other side of the wall, you have a peace that passes all understanding. So in all of your life's pursuits, whether they're investing, whether they're business, whether they're growing a community, whether they're ministry related or marketplace related, in every single pursuit, no matter where we are, we all have this opportunity to be close with the Lord, to have a peace that passes all understanding. And I'm not sure what wall you might have in your life today, but as a friend, let me just tell you that nothing feels better than when that sucker comes down. And you really don't have to be afraid of the thing that comes out because you chose to do the right thing. You don't. You trust God with that. If you want to know how the rest of the story goes down about the house, I could tell you, or you could just read it in the book. I'll tell you, and you could read it because I had about 75 books left, and they're a gift to you guys today. So let me close the story. Part of when we started Grace Bomb back in the day, so many stories came in from around the country. We took those stories, we took some of these Bible stories and stories from my life, and we put them in the book. It was published last year, and I had about 75 left-ish. And I'm like, Tyler, how many people are coming? He's like, I don't know, 75, maybe 100, we'll see. I was like, cool. So please, before you guys go, it's my gift to you. Just take a book on the way out, take some Grace Bomb cards on the way out. If you want to love people in a fun, surprising way while implicating Jesus. And God provided is the end of the story. Yeah. When the wall came down, yep, the guy came down. He's like, yep, that's not good. That's not good. But then he said, but it's not that hard to fix either. He's like, here's what they're going to do. They're going to punch 3 holes in right here, right here, right here. They're going to throw some rebar down and put some concrete in it, and maybe $800 later, you'll be able to move on with your deal. What? That's what I was, I mean, yeah, I spent more on the stupid thing I threw away. But isn't it like the Lord to take something we could be so worked up about, so scared about, that when we bring it into the open, in a step of faith, he takes care of it, guys. And what I know from this little story is the business world creates a whole lot of opportunity for walls to come up, doesn't it? The more you deal with people, the more you deal with money, and you guys know better than I do. But that also means there's so many more opportunities to step into grace. With me? All right. Don't forget to grab a book.